Elevation has this, monitoring form and things like that. And
Sure
every
is.
year we are, part of our compliance is to do an RFEB monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So my team and I were like, well, they're already used to doing that. What if we integrate into that, not just to monitor RFEB as a checklist thing, what if we also use that tool for all ELs, and then all teachers that have all ELs in the elementary and then core classes in the secondary were to complete this form.
Rowena Mack, welcome back to In This Together, our third episode together. And a lot has changed in Saddleback since we last talked. We were just talking offline. I'd love for you to just give us an update because you have a lot going on right now.
Sure. We have returned back to in-person instruction, unlike neighboring districts that did those in staggered schedule. We all did it at once. So elementary and secondary returned back to in-person instruction both at the same time. And that's been a few weeks now. I want to say, I think 2-3 weeks now since we have been back. And so it's still hybrid instruction in that half of the time they are in person, and then the other time they are doing distance learning to kind of facilitate the splits of the group. And then the split of the group actually looks a little bit different in elementary and in high school, just because of content area in elementary instruction. And then we still have some groups of students that decided to just do full distance learning the entire year. So we have teachers that are also just assigned to teaching full on distance learning for the entire year.
So you basically have all three models happening at once, and it happened like all of a sudden.
It did happen all of a sudden. It's probably a lot earlier than a lot of people would have wanted. But I think there was a lot of eagerness and maybe even some expectation from the community that we returned back to school. And when the county really released, took us off of the list, we really used that as an opportunity to kind of like, well, we're good to go. We're good to go. And now I know that the numbers keep on fluctuating. So it's not like, okay, this is going to be it for the rest of the school year. We always still have this worry and anticipation that, we may go back to full on distance learning. So, but at least we've experienced what that looks like. And that's not something that we hadn't done before. So I think that's why probably there was a lot of eagerness and anxiety right before the return to school, because we were trying to plan for every single scenario.
Right. Yeah. I mean, most of the folks that I'm speaking with on In This Together, the 4 other people that I'm chatting with and people are sort of getting ready to do that. They're taking maybe a gradual approach. Although
Right.
Vicky Saldala from Broward, she started actually, they go fully back, I think next week. They were starting on Thursday. That's a big district. So they're
Right.
doing something similar where the state has said you're clear to go, and they've kind of had
Yeah.
to follow suit. Let's kind of hone in on those English learners, because I'm sure just like the rest of the population, they are finding themselves kind of in different instructional settings depending on the choices that they've made. Do you have a
Sure.
sense first of sort of how many of those, what percentage maybe approximately of those students are doing remote as opposed to that hybrid model? And then I guess the follow-up to that would be, it's pretty early, but have you seen any kind of challenges in terms of equity with students coming in and then with the ones that have decided maybe to stay home? I know it's a lot, so feel free to take that apart if you need to.
No, that's okay. I wish I had an actual percentage for you, and I wish I understood, because you only hear it when it's not going well, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've been visiting a lot with teachers and doing a lot of office hours with them, specifically for ELs, and it's really a mixed bag. In the high school, attendance is a lot better than I really anticipated, because we would say like, oh, those high school kids, if they could sleep in all day, they're probably going to sleep in all day. But I think the flexibility of the schedule actually models more what they might experience at the university level once they're there. So I think we're finding out with those, younger adults, if you may, in high school, that that's actually working out for them. And so they're going, they're going. At the elementary, it's really still it isn't so much, as I was telling you offline, it isn't so much are they attending, but I really want to start gathering some data of what percentage of our ELs are in full distance learning only,
Right.
right?
Because that's a choice that they could make, right?
That's a choice that they can make. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried that if it's a significant number, just because I truly believe that more of them should be back in campus. And maybe we'll have an opportunity later on to talk about some plans that we're trying to cook up to return English learners back, all of them full time in the campus for the remainder of the school year.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that right now, if you don't mind. It seems like it's a good
Sure.
time to chat about it because my
Sure.
follow up to that was, your English learners in particular are sort of getting a different experience. On the one hand, one thing that we've talked about, I think I've talked about with you and quite a lot of others as well, is that teachers and students in many ways have kind of become more comfortable with this remote learning thing. And so a lot of the anxiety comes with what's it going to look like when we go back, right?
Right, right.
But once you do go back and that sort of first group goes back, or the people who opt in go back, that anxiety subsides and they go back to
Mhm,
in-person instruction, which I think everybody believes, at least for this particular group of students, that ELs is better.
mhm.
So I'd love for you to talk about what plans you have to get them back if maybe they've decided to stay remote, and or those kids who decided to stay remote who are English learners. How are you going to give them kind of an equitable experience?
Sure. If I could generalize, I think the reasons why English learner families may have decided to keep their kiddos at home is less more about their fear of safety procedures, but really for the schedule of their families. It's very hard if you have an AM PM schedule to only say I'm going to drop them off at 8 o'clock, but then I'll have to pick them up at 11:30, or that I have all morning and then I have to go drop them off at 11:30 and pick them up at 3:30. I mean, not many families have the luxury of that type of flexibility of schedule. So I think what that put families is in a difficult position to simply be just like, well, then just stay home. Just stay home because no one's going to drop you off, no one's going to pick you up. So at least that's a constant, even though that's not ideal. Um, in at high school, less so. It's really in elementary that we're finding out the ELs are being put in a position where they have to choose distance learning because of scheduling challenges. So what I'm working out with our elementary leadership is what would it look like if we continue with hybrid instruction, and if they're either AM or PM, that's fine, but on the off time that they're supposed to be home during asynchronous learning, we keep them in campus. And we would open up then study centers, lab centers, if you may, and we would staff them with supervision. So what everything they're supposed to be doing at home, they would just be doing in campus. So I would need to find spaces for them at the various campus and additional staff to be there because they would just be zooming anyway, right? They would be in Zoom doing their independent tasks, or um, doing some of those asynchronous tasks that their teachers have designed for them. But I think it's better if they stay in campus. It's better if there's somebody that's supervising them and checking in with them. And if there's somebody there that they can ask question, can keep them on task and make sure that they are getting the support that they need. So I'm exploring that possibility. I'm also exploring the possibility of, so that would only be that's the elementary plan. The secondary plan, I would think is the same, but again, it's a little bit more challenging because the way that it is, it's not like it's just an AM PM. They're in person depending if what their classes are, what periods of the day. So similarly, I would say I would just open up labs in the school campus and staff them with people, and then you're either going in person. If your class can accommodate you in person, your teacher can accommodate you, you go. If they cannot accommodate you when you're not scheduled to be there in person, then you're still in campus, but you're in this EL center, if you may. So those are the two things I'm exploring. It's really difficult sometimes to begin with, like, well, we can't do that. So as I'm working with people out in terms of like what are the supports that we need to provide for ELs, I encourage them not to begin with the logistics that make it impossible or difficult, but rather the need. What is the need? What is the
Yeah.
support that we need to provide? Let's start there and backfill that with the logistics that we know that we can do. So that's one thing. I also want to explore a Saturday academy. If I can open up a Saturday academy in regional centers, not for every site, but maybe by zones in neighborhood and things like that, where again, it would be staff with EL staff, teachers, instructional assistants, whoever's willing to come in. Um, and so I be able to maximize the resources that have been afforded to us by the CARES Act, and really utilize that very intentionally.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's very helpful. And I don't think that I've sort of heard as detailed of a, not necessarily a plan yet, but of a
Mhm.
plan that's in construction from anyone. Although I have heard a lot of different things about the benefits not only of doing this logistically for families who
Mhm.
can't sort of get their kids to and from school with the schedules they have. That's totally understandable. So that gets to the equity point in terms of families needing to work and this particular demographic really being affected by that as opposed to others who have that flexibility that you were talking about. I mean, the other thing that's good about that, I feel like, is that if you do it in the right way, you're beginning to stagger having more
Mhm.
students in and
Right.
figuring out what it looks like to have more students in the building for more time and sort of
Yeah.
testing it as you go,
Yeah.
which is so crucially important. I mean, that's I
Yeah.
feel like that's the model that as I talked to Dr. Adrian Johnson in Hearn, which is a rural district in a different situation, but they are doing that. They're taking that staggered approach. And he even said, they actually had, I don't know if you've experienced this, but he had some issues with people being exposed to COVID on the school staff and students, and a
Mhm.
couple positive cases actually. And he
Mhm.
actually, which you hear it and it's happening, but when you hear from someone and you speak with, your heart kind of
Mhm.
goes out. But he really took a positive approach to that. He said, because we took a staggered approach and because we were able to know exactly who these people were and where they
Right.
were, and we did the contact tracing, we now know what we need to do to sort of scale this up when it's bigger.
Right.
And he
Right.
attributes that as it's a shame that people, I guess everybody's healthy and fine, but it's a shame that happened. But it probably is going to happen at some point to
Mhm.
most districts. And if it's going to happen, it should be happening in the most controlled environment possible. And again, staggering people in is a great way to go about doing that. So I
Yeah.
think probably you're on the right track there.
Yeah. We're excited. We're excited about making it possible for the kids.
Yeah, so making it possible for the kids is one thing. I've talked to a lot of teachers recently.
Mhm.
How are you making it possible for them? I mean, how are they feeling? They must be. I mean, I was speaking with, Vicky from Broward brought on a literacy coach from one of her high schools in our last episode that we just released. Her name's Melissa Cabrera, and she just gave a very honest, transparent sort of
Mhm.
painted a picture of what it was like for her, and you can tell that she's passionate and she's doing amazing things, but she's certainly under a lot of stress and
Sure.
working with what she has. So I guess my question is, do you have a pulse of how your teachers are feeling right now? What are some triumphs and challenges that you've seen them deal with over the last couple weeks?
Absolutely. I'm gonna give you the same generosity and be very transparent as well with our experience. When we returned back to school back in the spring, we said, um, "Hey, let's support our ELs," but there wasn't a firm stipulation that you must provide designated ELD. Well, that of course shifted when we returned back to school, and I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I got called into the principal's office as the ELD coordinator, saying like, "Hey, there's grumblings among the union, saying like this is unfair. How can they be expected to still provide 30 minutes of designated ELD instruction when there's only 2.5 hour blocks that they're with kids? That's not fair to their EOs and to the other kids." All of that good stuff. So maybe, and I was really afraid that when that was brought up, because it seemed to suggest that what I was being asked to do is pull back on that expectation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Can you please pull back? Can you retract your statement and your expectation about that? And, we were like, it was a firm but a very understanding no. And it's like, no, we have to provide that. However, these are the supports that we're going to provide for teachers, right? So my team and I went, as if we haven't been already, developed a ton of resources for teachers with very specific models, examples, templates, and then we opened up all of these office hours by site for teachers to just come in and to say, like, brainstorm ideas with us and things like that. And we definitely had teachers like the teachers that were like knew what they had to do or were prepared to adjust accordingly. They're not going to be the ones that necessarily attend those office hours, right? So we did have some of those voices, if you may, that I think they were ready to fight. They were ready to fight in those
Right.
office hours and be like, Rowena, what are you doing to me? You know. And so again, I just really called the elephant in the room and I said, let's begin with this grumbling of 30-minute designated ELD. If we get hung up on the time, we're not going to go anywhere because that's what you're thinking the whole time is you're not going to make it fit. Okay. Again, back to what I said earlier. Let's begin with what is the need. I have two students. You have two students. Their needs are going to be different than a class that have 15 ELs in that class. And let's figure out what those different models are. So we talked through different models, different possibilities, combining a concurrent classroom with AM, PM, splitting the ELs among multiple teachers of the same grade level and alternating the instruction that way. All of these different models. And at the end of it, I think, it really came to a place like, okay, maybe I haven't won everyone. That's not really my point either. But I think it did open up some understanding. So that's what it is for the elementary. The secondary, I'm really pleased with how things are going, just because I said, like I said, the attendance was really low there and it helped that attendance is being taken. And so the teachers are reporting, really good things. And we are finally able to talk curriculum at the secondary level.
Oh, good. So that's, I mean, and I feel like as time has gone on, we've talked a lot about that with lots of folks about how, hey, when is it going to be time to focus on curriculum and instruction
Hmm.
and differentiation? But it does seem like there's never a time that you can let your sort of grip go of making sure that you're establishing relationships and continuing to
Right,
nurture social emotional learning.
right.
So it has to happen at the same time. Which, kind of brings me to my next question. When you talk about instruction, the big thing that comes up now is learning loss. I mean, this is a
Hmm.
word or an expression that I hear so much and that I know
Hmm.
lots of my colleagues at Elevation are hearing from our partner district. How do
Right,
we mitigate this learning loss? What tools do
right.
you, Elevation, have in place that can help
Yeah.
us mitigate the learning loss? So I guess at this point, as we approach mid-October,
Hmm.
um, one, have you been able to identify it and areas where it exists? And I'm sure it's different among different students.
Hmm.
And two, have you been able to put in um, strategies or ideas or solutions to be able to kind of mitigate that learning loss that's being perceived by many?
Sure. So at the elementary level, I may have talked about this in a previous session that we were together, that we were able to adapt a diagnostic that would identify where the gaps are for ELA and math. So I think just about every single one of our school site has finished their baseline, you know, beginning of the year administration of that. So we have data on that. We just finished. We've now hired 25 tier two intervention teachers. So these are 40% teachers, and what they're going to be doing is they're going to provide small group instruction for those students that we have identified as a result of iReady, which will be a different mindset for teachers once we explain. It's very exciting. Those that truly understand true MTSS, true RTI, and the power of data, but how data needs to be used for intervention are really excited about that. But I also predict that there are some teachers that are like, great, tier two, I can start recommending Johnny, I can start recommending Mary. We're like, no, not really. We have a specific purpose for that. So we're going to start training for those teachers next week. And hopefully the next time that we talk, I can talk a little bit about what those experiences are like. And what we're doing specifically for them. The secondary, we haven't quite developed what we're going to do, but we know that we have a space for academic intervention. Thinking about elevation tools, you may be familiar that elevation has this, monitoring form and things like that. And
Sure
every
am.
year, we are part of our compliance is to do an RFEP monitoring.
Hmm.
So my team and I were like, well, they're already used to doing that. What if we integrate into that, not just to monitor RFAP as a checklist thing, what if we also use that tool for all ELs, and then all teachers that have all ELs in the elementary and then core classes in the secondary were to complete this form. So we actually developed a form that they would complete through elevation. But what I liked about the process that we have set up is that we really delineated it's not just like, is the student making progress? What does the student need help? I really specified, is the student ready to learn? Let's talk about readiness to learn. Like, do they have the device? Are they zooming in with you on a regular basis? Are they showing up their faces when they're in Zoom to ensure that they're actually present, you know? And then there's like a classroom engagement piece. Are they actually participating? Are they completing their work? And then based on classroom assessment, are you able to identify if there's a language skill support or a content area support? And then we would use that data then to be more intentional about the support, because yes, we have learning loss. Yes, we need to, but I don't know what we can address if we don't know what the problem
Right,
is.
right.
And I don't want this to be a catch all. Just because you're an EL, you need a support. No, that may be true. You will need support, but what kind of support? You know what I mean? It's very different. Like, do you just need someone to hold your hand and help you navigate the Google Classroom, or is it really that you need some help in foundational skills? So those are the things we're excited to. And so we're going to launch that on Monday, that progress monitoring for elementary, and then give teachers a couple of weeks, and then pair that up with our diagnostic data to really start putting kids in the right basket.
Good. Yeah. And you just summed it up like I was going to sum it up, which is that it sounds like you're using a lot of different things and data points, both, in terms of assessments that you've been able to give until
Mm-hmm.
now, and more kind of formative
Yeah.
stuff in the terms of along the lines of monitoring forms that everybody is filling out. And boy, I think that's a great idea with the monitoring forms. As someone who trained for elevation in a lot of different districts, and I certainly won't
Mm-hmm.
mention any district names, there are some districts that are using it very, very well, like the way that you're using it. But there are many districts that are just it's a compliance thing, right? Check the
Mm-hmm.
box and move on. And so to be able to make that sort of how you want it, to customize it in a way that is
Mm-hmm.
helpful for you to get the information that you want, that's great. And I'll definitely be curious to see how that goes. Not that because it's an elevation tool, just because I think it's a great way to get information next
Mm-hmm.
time we talk. Quick follow up question, because I think people are wondering about this, or I know I was. You said that you have been able to hire, I think it was 40% folks that were going to be interventionists.
Mm-hmm.
How are you able to do that? Like, where do those
Right.
funds come from? If you don't mind me asking.
No, no. From every district has to write a learning continuity plan, which replaced the LCAP, and then there were extra funding, stimulus funding that were given to districts in order to address all of the learning loss and support for specific populations of student groups. And so, that is good and bad in a way, because, like I said, a pandemic had to happen before resources had to be allocated. But you know what? I'm not going to get hung up on that. I'm going to celebrate the fact that we have this pot of resources and we're finally able to put MTSS into play and the things that we know that we need to provide for students. So that is where that is coming from. Being able to hire those teachers come from that. And at first, we were told that we had to use all of that by the end of the school not calendar year, but then it was extended. So then we have some time to do that. So then we're like, okay, and so we really earmark those for very specific uses, but we knew that a big chunk of it will go to intervention.
Good. That's good to hear. I'm glad I asked that question. And I know that, for most people, that funding it's there and they know what it's for. But I do feel like there's a lot of people who are, I mean, myself included, just very confused about the whole how you fund what and how you get the people that you need.
Hmm.
And that's a whole job in and of itself, just figuring out
Right,
how all that works.
right.
And not one that I would be particularly good at,
No,
quite frankly.
not me. I hardly balance my checkbook, Steve.
Yeah. I'm on the same page. My wife does that. Um, so I want to talk about just maybe like we've been doing this for a few weeks now, and I think it's probably we could probably ask this question fairly. I want to know if what sort of one thing that you feel like your district is doing particularly well that
Hmm.
others might be able to learn from who are listening to this? And I know that's a big question. We've already talked about some things, but maybe reflecting in the last couple weeks, is there a way that you could describe something that you've done that is kind of replicable maybe in other places that you feel like has gone
Hmm.
particularly well at Saddleback? And then to get you ready, I'll ask you the opposite of that question after.
Sure, sure. I think we are doing really well in communicating to our stakeholders, communicating to our teachers, communicating to our principals, and communicating to our families. With that said, some may argue that I don't like what you're communicating, but it's communication nonetheless. It's like, and some of it is like, I'm sorry, we're just telling you this right now. We just got word from the governor that this is what we have to do. So those are sometimes some of the challenges. So even back in the spring, we started out, the superintendent's office put out a COVID newsletter. So there are COVID updates, and even something super simple as numbering them as COVID newsletter update number 1, 2, 3, 4, so that they could keep on following those things. And then so utilizing that, utilizing the communications office, making sure we utilize our bilingual parent advocates and our community liaisons in terms of reaching out to our families. If it means translating those documents, which we do already, making videos that walk them through the process, giving them extended hours so that they can individually reach out to families. And for our elementary and secondary directors, having very regular communication systems with their principals, providing those principals with templates of communication that they can customize for their school, but at least it has all the basic information that they need to know. I mean, those may seem kind of simple, but those are really the things that's like, how are we going to scale up and multiply this communication? Because it's going to be very easy to lose a detail. So as much as possible, kind of control the message in the way that it's like you're getting the same information.
Yeah, and I think there are two key takeaways, at least for me there. One is you're sort of differentiating the way that you're communicating with
Hmm.
people. You mentioned simple newsletters,
Hmm.
videos, all kinds of different ways. Everybody, I've certainly learned, through this work that there are
Hmm.
some people who love to watch the video of you and I
Right,
chatting, but there are many people who say, I don't need that video. Just give me the
right,
audio and I'll listen to it, or just
right.
give me a transcript, or give me so, you have to make sure that you differentiate as much for students as you do for parents, which I think
Hmm.
sometimes gets lost in translation. Um, the other thing I'm hearing from what you're saying, and I think is also really important, is that you are not afraid to tell people what they don't want to hear. Your words, not mine. I mean, I think that's
Hmm.
important because you can be
Hmm.
faced with this, like, really, like, the governor is saying this and we have to do this, and there can be
Yeah,
this like like paralysis. Like, how do I
right.
communicate this message? How do I tailor it the exact right way so people are okay? But at a certain point, there's going to be, especially now, news that certainly not everybody's happy with. And I imagine
Right.
there's some news that everybody's like, what? But
Yeah,
that's an art form, being able to
right.
get it out, to people quickly and in a way that they may be angry, but it's understandable.
Yeah, yeah. We have heard because the schedule of it is really Friday afternoon. And sometimes, depending on how good or bad the news
That's how
is,
your weekend
then
goes.
the teachers are like, I don't want that bomb to be dropped on a Friday afternoon that I keep on thinking about it all weekend long. But it's like, well, we need to give you the information, and it needs to be, the brain works out of habit, and everyone needs to know, like, when is that going to come out?
Hmm. Hmm.
Every Friday there's something that's coming out.
Right. Well, aside from sending those things out on Friday, I'm joking,
Hmm.
but what is something that you feel like you could do better, or that you're looking to other district like yours for some
Hmm.
support or for some information? Like, if you're watching this series, what is
Hmm.
something that you'd like to hear somebody tell you to do in a more efficient way, let's say?
I'd love to hear more ideas on what people are doing for those academic interventions. I think everyone is saying, and they're not lying about this, like, we're going to provide additional support. We're going to go above and beyond and give our ELs what they need. But what exactly are you doing? And how do we know that it's actually kind of like above and beyond, particularly at the secondary level? Because I am getting impatient with the excuse of like, but we're secondary, we're so different, we're so complicated. And you're like, it's, yeah, maybe, but it's really at the end of the day kind of like corralling people, corralling resources, putting systems in place, and making sure places, people are in the right places where they need to be and things like that. I think if we just give up on this like mindset of like that's not going to be possible, it's like let's not begin there. When you begin there, it's like it's icky. It's not a good place to begin already. So I'd love to hear more and ideas on that, and I'm continuing to kind of watch out from districts. And I haven't heard a whole lot, which means it is a collective work that needs to happen.
I think you're right. It's a question that I've asked. I mean, I haven't given up asking it, but I also have I give interviewees a lot of leeway on it because there's just so much going on. And actually,
Yeah.
frankly, most people will say, yeah, we're not there yet. Although say what you
Hmm.
say, which is, boy, I'd love to see some more specifics about what's going on. Um, what has made me happy and inspired me in some strange way is the transparency that people
Hmm.
have. Um, from a classroom teacher to a superintendent to
Hmm.
an EL coordinator like yourself, who's responsible for it was in a leadership position. I mean, people are being totally honest, and I think I think the higher you go up, and I have not been in a leadership position in a school, so I maybe am speculating a little bit, but I do feel my experience of a teacher tells me that the higher you go up on the ladder, the
Hmm.
more your answers become almost political, and
Hmm.
less transparent and more. Let me make sure I'm saying this in the right way,
Hmm.
like it's some presidential debate. People are trying to
Yeah.
dodge the questions, but it's not happening now. People are not dodging questions. In fact, people are
No.
giving me more information than I usually ask for, which I
Right.
think is a good thing. And hopefully that's one of the silver linings that we have, because if we all work together and kind of be vulnerable a little bit, it can lead to some change. Are you seeing that too? Like, are folks like in your district and leadership, people being pretty honest and transparent about what their needs are and their deficiencies are?
Oh my gosh, just even the other day, I was checking in with a director who works with our principals. And I was like, how are you doing? And, it's a lot for her. And she is a very resilient, strong leader. And she's like, I just cried in front of all my principals. I just cried. It's like, my heart goes out to them and the work that they're doing. And it's so hard, and for her to say that, and I was like, wow, that you would admit that, or that you would do that in front of them. She might have stifled that in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I mean, I've seen people even in just a couple of the last interviews I've done, people kind of are at the verge of tears. Not so much because they're like they have no idea what to do next, but because they're
Yeah.
just like, man, I feel like I'm in a place now where I can do this and I can
Yeah.
kind of be like, all right, I need help, which
Right.
is good because I remember being like for the first 3 to 5 years of my teaching career, and I started teaching when I was 22. I didn't ask for help. That was
Yeah.
a sign of weakness,
Yeah.
which was terrible because it would have made me such a better teacher had I asked for help. And I think it probably took me 5 years to be able to, do that. And I hope now, particularly for newer teachers, that that culture has changed. I think that's one silver lining here for sure.
Hmm.
Um, all right, so let's wrap it up here. I'm curious. We have definitely one more conversation together, you and
Hmm.
I. And there's been a lot of changes, and I imagine the next couple weeks, there'll probably be a lot more. But what's top of mind for you right now? What do you hope to be seeing or moving on in the next couple weeks that we can kind of talk more about?
I hope to share some more specific wins about the academic interventions we're putting into place.
I figured
I
you'd say
hope,
that.
yeah, I hope I can give you some update on all of those crazy ideas that I'm cooking up with some of our leadership team. I hope we can make even one of them happen. Even if I were given just a couple of sites where we could prototype it, um, we just really need to get started. We just really need to be courageous and say, like, let's just do this. Gosh, there's nothing that is standard to what we've been doing for the past 8 months. What's another new idea? What's another innovative idea? And I think this is the time to really explore that. So I hope that I can give you some specificity about not only the structure and the plan, but actual outcomes that are based on student success.
Well, that would be just as helpful to other districts as what you wanted in terms of academic interventions for yours. So I really hope that we can get that out of you as well. But in the meantime, best of luck with everything. I know that there's a lot going on. As always, I appreciate your time, your transparency, and the information that you give us from your district in Saddleback Valley, California, because it's really always quite useful. And I always enjoy the conversation, Rowena. So I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Steve. Take care.